Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Call to order this committee of the whole meeting.
Yeah.
The whole meeting of the whole committee. And we're glad to be here today. We've got three primary items on the agenda today. And I was going to suggest that we move through items 1 and 2 and then maybe take a minute and I'll check back with each of you to see if you want to stop for dinner or push on through and then eat dinner afterwards so we can see how we're feeling at that point. That's okay. Okay. So I guess the secretary should call the roll.
Here.
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 Here. Present.
Of course, we all extended our condolences to Councilmember McIntosh on the loss of his mother who passed last week, I guess, or a week before last. So we'll begin with item number 1, which is an update on the City Council strategic objectives, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Garrity.
Thank you, Mayor Joines, members of the City Council. We're going to go quickly through the strategic plan to try to give you an update of where we are. Back in January of 2010, this council updated your strategic plan and added some new focus areas and some new key work items. Just kind of remind you on the first slide, those are the 6 strategic focus areas that council said we want to focus on. Economic vitality, safe and secure community, livable neighborhoods, healthy environment, quality transportation, and service excellence.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. I
Yes,
didn't hear the last part of the first one. Would you have the city manager repeat that one again?
Economic vitality and diversity.
Thank you.
More specifically, under that category, economic vitality and diversity, the council elected to select 6 objectives. The first was to recruit and retain employers. That's all about the jobs. Second was promote downtown revitalization. The third, promote commercial development in economically disadvantaged areas. Fourth, enhance skills of the workforce. Fifth, develop and redevelop commercial industrial business park sites. And last but certainly not least, assist small businesses. What I wanted to focus on the next slide are the key work items that we've been working on this year related to that first objective. And they're really categories. I'm not going to go through each one, but they're really kind of categorized in a couple large areas. One of those are the job generators, things like Whitaker Park, the Union Cross, the Innovation Quarter, things that are large investments that the council has asked staff to work on, but they're designed to bring in more employers, to bring in more jobs for our citizens. Another large area is downtown, and 2 of the big projects there are the Convention Center redevelopment and renovations and Marshall Plaza. And then a really large section here is all the redevelopment of the commercial blighted areas, and there are many, many of those, as you all know. The Rucas, Liberty and 16th Street redevelopment, New Walkertown, MLK, Walltown corridors, Northwest Boulevard in Thurman is a recent one that's been brought to our attention that we're working on. Polo and Cherry is another area that we're working on. They're all areas that it's a combination of commercial, a little bit of housing, residential, and just blight where we're working to try to invest city dollars, leverage city dollars with private dollars for redevelopment. And then, of course, there's the buy local, MWBE, and other things that we've got on that list. Mayor, I can stop there if there are questions before we move to the next one.
Any questions? Mr. Taylor's glad to see the offender work program on there as well. What he brought forward.
And that actually kicks off here this month. This month coming up. So, as far as the hiring of the first people in that program, so
I'm excited about that. I know you are.
If we keep talking about it, I'm going to feel inclined to get on my soapbox and start talking about it.
Well, don't get inclined. All right.
Okay. The next objective was safe and secure community. And you can see that the council elected to come up with 4 areas of focus. Expand community policing, reduce crime and the fear of crime, because as we all know, the fear can be just as paralyzing as the actual crime, enhance fire prevention, and improve public safety service quality. Turn to the next page, you'll see the safe and secure community work items. They're kind of grouped into a couple areas too. First, there are a lot of things that we've done or we are doing that are related to community policing. We've done the gun surrender, and we're working on another one of those, where the chief is working to create a police athletic league. We've done a lot of community trust talks and clergy trust talks, and we're getting ready to kick off a pilot ward walking tour. Councilman Montgomery actually suggested we're going to start in his ward, but I'd imagine that the rest of you would be interested in that as well. An initiative where the police chief and staff from different departments, along with the elected officials, will walk certain neighborhoods in the ward to get out and meet the public and see firsthand the issues they have. Again, taking the government to the people as opposed to bringing the people to the government. Another big area is facilities and technology. A lot of investments in the bonds as well as in other areas of the budget having to do with both improving our public safety facilities and adding new technology to make sure that, again, we can maintain that and improve that trust between law enforcement and the community. The other area in the fire department is mainly focused on prevention and education. Really, as we've talked about many times in the fire department, so many of our fires could be prevented if we had better education and better efforts to train and prevent so many of our fires. We have, as the chief will tell you, more kitchen fires than is the norm, and it's something we want to work on.
Soapbox moment?
Sure.
Okay.
Molly?
I certainly think that the kitchen fires are something that we need to address. Sorry. And I wonder if the city couldn't, or the fire department couldn't, buy and sell those thingabobbers that go over your stove to put out fires. I mean, people don't know about them, and also it's hard to find them. You have to go online and search for them. So I would suggest that we could.
I'm going to let Chief Mayo talk about it, but just in summary, we're doing two things. We're working on a new TV 13 video, and then secondly, he's working on a major grant proposal, but I'll let him tell a little more detail about that.
Chief Mayo?
Good afternoon, thanks. Yeah, the manager is correct. The grant, if we were successful in receiving that, we would purchase 5,000 sets of stovetop fire stops. And there's another name brand. There are a couple of manufacturers out there, but stovetop fire stops is the one I'm most familiar with. And we would place them in our geo-proximities where we see the highest incidence of cooking fires. We see cooking fires at about twice the rate of the national average. As to your suggestion about buying them and selling them, I am not unfamiliar with that concept. We have tried it, and the challenge for us is getting people to have a fear of fire. People are not scared of fire. They are scared of having their car stolen. They're scared of having their house broken into. There are all sorts of things that Chief Roundtree can take advantage of in terms of people, of the public's fear. People are absolutely not scared of fire, and that is the challenge. And that is something that I nor any of my colleagues that I speak to, and I have a fairly broad network around the country, nobody has figured out how to make people afraid of fire. And as a result of that, you can say, well, here these stovetop fire stops cost you $60 if you buy them online, but we'll sell them to you tonight for $40. And they all of a sudden, it sounds like a great idea until you say they're $40, and then they lose interest. And $40 is about the cheapest insurance I know you can buy, but we have not made a good argument yet for making people become fearful.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Councilman Burke and then Councilman Adams.
I was going to say, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, when we look at the safe and secure communities, some of these things that we have put a lot of emphasis on. So what I would say, they're really not new things that what we're going to be doing, giving a new twist to some things. For instance, when we look at clergy trust talks, we've been having clergy trust talks. We've also had ward walking tours. Maybe we could improve them, and I think that's a good suggestion, Councilman Montgomery, if it's something new that can be added, because I think that's what we need to do to attract citizens to get more involved and know what we are doing. And along with these things that we're talking about, I will say again, I sent a letter to Mayor now, and we let the people at the national level know that we're just a little step ahead of some things that they were talking about. So I would say to the city manager and his marketing staff that the new things that we hear as we go to different kinds of meetings, like the energy that Councilman Montgomery has, and that's really appreciated. And the ideas and suggestions that have been given by all of us, let us look at what we're doing and let them show us from other places to put on what we're doing a better impression in the minds of people.
Councilman Adams?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. One of the things that I don't see, Mr. Garrity, and maybe it's in here, in these safe and secure communities, is emergency management preparedness. I'm concerned that, again, that, we went to Emmitsburg, we sent all these people, and I know all of these are the key work items, but I also think that emergency management preparedness should be on this list. In that, again, are we ready if there is an emergency catastrophe in this city, that we know we can do the best job as a team to provide a safe and secure city to our citizens, and I'm concerned about that.
You're right. It's mentioned. I didn't put it on this page. It's actually in the plan, but there is more work to be done there, especially the follow-up to the opportunities for enhancement that were pointed out to us in Emmitsburg.
Councilman Montgomery, then Councilman Clark.
And I apologize, Mayor, and if the council will belabor me, I wanted to step back. It was a point I forgot.
I'm sorry. Back to the economic.
Yes, sir. And it was just on the point of enhancing skills of workforce, which was under the list there, but it was not specific in terms of the actual key work items piece. And there was a question in terms of what items tie back into that particular objective.
Okay. You'll bear with me for a second. If you go to the actual detailed strategic plan document that we put behind there, we have, so far, we've made a presentation. We had the Piedmont Triad Workforce Development Authority.
What page are you on there, at least?
Page 21. We had the Workforce Development Council make a presentation to a committee of council. We are working on options to come up with a program, Mr. Brooks, that would be similar to Youth Build, but for entry-level tech training programs. The SOAR program that we've already talked about with former offenders. They're the ones that are listed in the strategic plan.
Okay.
Councilman Clark?
On the, go back to safety and secure communities, the ISO rating, that does impact how much everyone's house and fire insurance costs. How can we impact that?
Chief Mayo, about ISO?
We actually had some good news. It went up from a 3 to a 2, but I'll let Chief Mayo.
Okay.
Chief Roundtree tried to get me to sit up here in the front row. So the ISO, normally it is generally accepted, and I'm not going to tell you it happens every time, but it is generally accepted that when you fall from 7 to 6, when you go any lower than that, which is a higher score is a lower number, that it only affects commercial properties. And we have been in communication with, in contact with marketing and communications. So our new grade will take effect in June, and we are planning to roll out some information through marketing and communication to let primarily our commercial property owners know that they need to get in contact with their insurance companies and let them know that we improved from a 3 to a 2 and see if they will realize any reduction in their premiums.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Next one.
I was going to say, too, if you want to be afraid of fire, you should watch some of the videos that Chief Mayo sends me every week. He's doing a good job at getting me afraid of fire. So, they're not from here. They're from other places. They're training videos.
maybe put them
on
Channel
13. The next area is livable neighborhoods, and as you can see, the council adopted 5 areas: improve the character and condition of neighborhoods, expand housing assistance, support public art, community appearance, preserve historic resources, and support inclusion of all community populations. Look at the next page. Those kind of fall into in 3 large categories. They're all the initiatives that we're working on that relate to housing. Some of these cross over to economic vitality and diversity, some of the same areas and corridors that we're working on to try to redevelop areas to provide better, safe housing. We're also working on and the council just talked about it last month. We'll talk about it next month. It was on the committee agendas, a proposal for workforce housing, to have a requirement or at least a guideline to try to encourage more developers to provide some moderate income housing so that we don't price ourselves out of the middle class market, basically. Another big area is that public art and historic preservation. The council just approved a public art plan. We've been partnering with the Creative Quarters Coalition. We're actually coming back next month to talk about that with Public Works. We're working on Old Salem infrastructure and many other projects related to historic preservation. And then last but not least are those many important things related to inclusion. The Human Relations Department has been kind of the lead on that. They're working on a Hispanic outreach master plan, partnering with the UNC on that program, as well as all the work the College Advisory Board and the Youth Advisory Council have done.
Mr. Montgomery?
Just again, I would not pass up the opportunity to make a comment in reference to the workforce housing piece, and really ask council. There was a article or several articles that were written within the last month's edition of Governing magazine, and on the front of that magazine, it had a big G on the front of it, which was for gentrification, and it talked specifically about the national trend of redevelopment in center cities and how that is impacting communities and how the need for affordable housing is there. But it gives a very good perspective, and I would suggest anyone to read those articles. It's about 10, 15 different pages that talks about the new issue in terms of that when you don't have that, the issue that you have with now suburban areas dealing with poverty when they never had to deal with it, and then resources not being there because people are being pushed into those type of areas. And so I think it really gives great context to the conversation that we're having around that. So,
thank you.
Just to add to that, number of years ago when we had someone in town who was talking about housing and the future of housing, one of the things I remember clearly him talking about was the fact that our neighborhoods surrounding the downtown, the older neighborhoods, the Ardmores, the West Salem, the Old Salem, all around downtown, that those were going to have to be our moderate income housing. That people were going to get pushed out of the center city because of the pricing.
Joe Riley. Okay, Lee.
Okay. The next area, and it's a big area, healthy environment. The council adopted several objectives here: protect land and reduce sprawl, enhance air quality, support green initiatives, manage water quality and quantity, develop comprehensive solid waste management strategies, expand open space and recreation facilities, and expand access to healthy food options.
Mayor, may I go back?
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pleased that Councilman Montgomery and Councilman Light would bring up what they brought up. Years ago, when I got on this council, you had people living on the 7th down near Crystal Tower, and that's exactly what happened to those people. And they put those houses down there that you see today, the Crystal Tower people, and your federal dollars subsidized them. And so the points that you bring up is something that I feel that we need to be very, very sensitive and aware of. We don't need to push people away. We need to make the areas for folks of different economic levels.
Councilman Taylor?
And since we've gotten back on the subject, I can say today and the last couple of days of last week, I've spoken to some students who are in some of the local area colleges who are concerned about affordable housing. They want to be able to live in downtown and in some of the urbanized areas, but with some of the proposed or perceived gentrification, they say they move to other cities because they like kind of living where there's hustle and bustle. And I just want to take a moment and mention that the Human Relations Commission, in reference to all this, is having a big meeting with Forsyth Tech, Winston-Salem State University, Wake Forest University. It's called the College Summit, and they'll be discussing hot-button topics like these with some of the students about how we can attract and retain our young professionals, and affordable housing is at the top of the conversation, from what I understand.
Good. Yeah. Molly?
Just on a number of these issues, quickly. I don't know that we have chicken farms that much in Winston-Salem, but certainly that has been in the news, and that brings up a problem. Why should plants have to scrub their smokestacks and chicken facilities not have to clean up the smell and force people to live in an unhealthy environment? I don't know if Forsyth County has that much of a problem, but that crawled all over me. But at any rate, and as far as expand open spaces and whatever, we're going to bring you something in the next month or so about trying to expand native plantings instead of exotic, foreign type plants that unfortunately have crept into our plant list. So, and one other thing real quickly, I don't know how many of you saw first took part in Creek Week and saw the editorial last Friday about Creek Week and how important it is, our waters, and how important they are. And I just want to give a shout out to Roseanne Lesperance in our stormwater department, because she's the one who brought that here. It's it's not in too many places in the country, and I think it's an extraordinary help to the city. So, as I say, shout out to Roseanne.
Good, thank you. Robert?
We throw around the term affordable housing a lot. I would like for somebody to put a dollar number on the table. We say as well it's 80% of the medium income and all that. I'd like a dollar number. What are we looking for
Okay.
I guess a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom type of apartment or house, however you want to define it. I personally haven't rented an apartment since I was 23, so I still think they cost $250 a month. Oh, no. It's been a while.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, I know that. The other one has to do with this open space issue. I just had an issue in the West Ward concerning an infill, and that is one of the solutions to the sprawl, is to try to develop our little infills, kind of fill in what's there. In this case, it was just a little bit over 2 acres. It was not a very large site, somewhere between 3 and 6 houses, and the issue of stormwater management was raised. And this particular property would be almost impossible to do because it drained in 4 different directions. It was kind of a little hill, so it drained, each lot would drain differently. And I just think that's something we need to look at. I believe, Lee, maybe a month ago we got a list of potential infill locations. It would be interesting to take a look at that list and see how many of them would fall under significant stormwater management issues and whether or not that is an impediment. And having said that, I'm not suggesting we don't address stormwater, because I do think that's one of the issues we have. But if we've got, in this case, 2 acres that can't be developed because they can't afford to put in 3 retaining ponds, I just think something we need to look at, just to be sure that the stormwater ordinance properly addresses infill.
Good.
Thank you.
Would you have a comment?
Well, I know Councilman Clark asked about affordable housing, and make sure those numbers, affordable and workforce housing, are defined in terms of those.
Right, they're two different.
Okay, yeah, please.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on healthy environment? Good.
You want to move on to, okay. The next area is quality transportation. We had 3 objectives: improve our network, expand bike, sidewalk, and greenway network, and enhance public transit. Look at the next page, the key work items. They fall into 2 or 3 categories. A lot of efforts around Business 40, involving streetscape, involving enhancements, involving MLK corridor, because that's going to be one of the new thoroughfares when Business 40 closes. A lot of those efforts are ongoing right now. Another big, huge area that we're working on is all the sidewalk and pedestrian programs. Everything from the sidewalk construction that's in the bonds, corridor improvements on Polo Cherry, child pedestrian projects, and several greenway projects from rails to trails to Brushy Fork Greenway, et cetera. There are a lot of that is underway, and a lot of that is moving towards fruition. And then last but not least is the mass transit Worcester rerouting. The public hearings on that comprehensive rerouting will be in May. That's, as you all know, a major undertaking. And then, of course, I don't want to leave out Union Station, which is both an economic development and a transportation project, and vital both to the community as well as the transportation project.
Questions, comments? Mr. Bessie?
Question on the Union Station project. One of the things that we worked on during the NLC conference was a meeting with USDOT folks about the possibility of a Tiger grant to facilitate completion of that renovation. Got very encouraging results. I just wanted to check if we followed up with our Washington consultant.
We're talking with Leslie, yes.
All right, great. Thanks.
Yep.
One of the key things we picked up was we actually needed to ask for a little more
Mm-hmm.
of the project in order to qualify for the grant. But if we did that, we would be likely extremely competitive for that grant category.
Good, thank you. I met with her too. I think I got the same feeling, Mr. Bessie. She's from South Carolina, I think, or Georgia or some place. She understood the South.
Yeah. It was just a comment I'd see there. They've started the roof work on Union Station. So.
That's good. That's great to see Northern Beltway on the list. Yeah. Finally.
Tell how long it's been around.
20 years. I was a child.
Okay, the last area is service excellence, and the council adopted 4 objectives there. Ensure service delivery efficiency and effectiveness, always a critical thing for everything we do. Enhance employee professional development and training, maintain our fiscal strength, our financial strength, and expand policy oversight and reporting. Particularly there, I think the emphasis has been on citizen involvement and oversight. If you look at the key work items on the next page, they kind of fall into 2 or 3 categories. One big area has to do with technology, trying to use technology to reduce our use of paper, to enhance our customer service for developers and any other customers. So that's a big initiative. A lot of these have to do with technology. A lot of other ones have to do with fiscal strength, user fee studies, maintaining our AAA bond rating. And then there's a big area that that leads into the next section of this workshop, and those have to do with what we're calling managing for results. City staff does a lot of different functions related to benchmarking, performance measurement, employee evaluations, but we haven't ever really done a good job, in my opinion, of tying it all together, wrapping it all together. When I talk to each one of you and to any citizen, you don't really care about how many efforts we make or how many memos we write. You care about results. The bottom line is, are we making a difference, a real difference? Is that greenway completed so that the citizens can walk on it? Is that sidewalk built to improve child safety? And on and on. That's what we care about, is the results. And so we're working on trying to take all of those initiatives, those management initiatives, and put them together into a program that we're calling Managing for Results. And I'm going to ask, in the next section, I'm going to ask our budget director, Trevor Miner, to kind of go over that. He's seen that in other communities, and I'm all for stealing things if they work, so he's going to go over that for us.
Montgomery?
Yeah, before that goes there was one item in terms of the professional development and training portions. Do we have a person on staff that their job is just professional development and training, or is that left specifically to departments?
No, we have a full-time person in human resources. Okay. That's her job.
Okay.
But may I just say, at one time, it was more evident that we had one. We knew. You remember the man?
Mr. Tom.
Ernie Tompkins.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And there was more interaction because actually you would, to have someone ask that question, it must not be quite as... Who is the person doing that?
Brenda Holmes, who works for in human resources, is in charge of employee training. What happened over the years is because of budget cuts, the training program got severely reduced. We used to have a requirement that all employees had to have at least 20 hours a year of professional training at all levels, and without the funding, that kind of was whittled away. We're working incrementally on trying to bring that back up within budget restrictions. So it's much more robust than it was a year ago, but we have a long way to go.
And if I can add to that, there are a lot of innovative ways of doing professional development staff training. I didn't do it all for a long time, but I did it for at least a year and a half, and so there's a lot of innovative ways of looking at professional development training that is different, and so I would just challenge us to make sure we're exploring all opportunities.
Okay. All right.
Well, that covers your strategic objectives. Should we move on into item 2?
Yeah. What I will do, Mayor and Council, is new fiscal year we'll bring back an update on new key work items that fit into the same criteria.
We're into this managing for results, and our budget director, Mr. Minor, will walk us through this section.
Oh, yeah. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Mayor Jones, council members. Great introduction, Lee, as far as the segue into this particular piece. And I'll just start off by saying something that these guys have probably, everyone here has probably heard me say a lot on staff, is that it's a very fitting time that we're putting all this together at the time where we're doing the preview of the budget at this point in time, because I've always said that the budget is actually a tool to help implement policy. That's what it is. Policy is the important piece. So first thing you may ask is, what is managing for results? That's a very good question to ask, and like Lee said, it's a way of packaging everything and organizing information. And today I'm just going to go over the framework of that right now. And I'm also going to explain why this is something that we should do. And just initially get into the process of how we would go about implementing it and identifying where we're currently at right now and what are the next steps. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually define what is managing for results. Basically, managing for results is basically the plan that we want to achieve. We want to focus on what do we want to achieve, what is the result. And we want to budget for that result, which means we want to allocate resources to where council has decided, okay, you guys have focus areas, which is the first step in what we need to do. So we need to allocate our resources in such a way that we can achieve those results. And in order to make sure that we are achieving those results, as Lee mentioned, we have to go and we actually have to do an evaluation to ask, okay, how are we doing? Are we doing what we said we were going to do? Have we done it in the most efficient manner that we can possibly do it? And is there a better way to do what we're currently doing or to achieve the results that we want to achieve? Just to give you a little background, there are currently in North Carolina a few municipalities, counties that actually do this right now. Mecklenburg County is one that's been doing this for a while. The city of Charlotte. Durham County is now in the process of working on M4R. Also the city of Durham and the city of Raleigh. So most people are moving in the direction of the elected officials want to know, what are we basically getting for our money? And hopefully in the summer of 2015, under the direction of Lee and consultation of employees, the city of Winston-Salem, we hope to develop this model and have it done at Managing for Results. the summer. This is a little chart, and what this graph shows you is just the cyclical process of managing for results. The first step, council's already taken, and it's setting strategic objectives. Also looked at the corporate strategies that are, you guys have actually laid that out under your focus areas. It's in your book that you have. Next thing that we have to do is align the programs fittingly. All the programs that are associated with, let's say, safe and secure communities. We need to find out every program that's associated with safe and secure communities, line them up, let you guys look at the performance measures, set some targets, and start to measure. How are we doing? Are we moving in the direction that council wants us to move in? On top of that, we have to budget for the results. That's the allocation of resources that I was speaking of earlier. What is the level of expectation that we have for these particular programs, or rolling up higher to the focus area? How much do we need to invest? How much can we invest? Next piece is the performance management piece. That deals with looking at all the performance measures and then going back and doing the evaluation to find out, are we doing the best job that we can do? Basically looking at all the metrics behind it. And then it just comes back around again. After the evaluation, you go back in, you say, okay, are these strategic objectives realistic? Is this what we want to achieve? Are we moving in the right direction? And those can be recalibrated at any point in time if need be. Here's just, again, managing for results, what we want to do. We basically fund the results instead of the work, is what we're talking about here. We look at the relationship between where and how and the results of the money spent. Performance is tied to budgets prospectively rather than retrospectively. What I mean by that is that we say, okay, we're going to allocate X number of dollars to achieve Y result. Instead of looking back, this is what we got for the money that we put in. We say, this is the funding, this is what we should achieve. Decision makers are aware of the resources and the allocations, which are part of the budget development, so you know how much you're allocating for a particular program, for a particular result. And one other note of this, this is very time consuming. It's a lot of data gathering, organization of data, getting programs aligned. So you need to go through at least 1 year of the process to see the actual results because you have to be able to do that evaluation. Implementation. One of the ways that we go about implementing the new M4R process is looking at a focus area goal review teams. And these teams are made up of employees who have programs within the council, within the council created focus areas. And they'll review the goals and actually the progress. For instance, again, safe and secure communities. You could have your police, fire, emergency management. Folks sit and look at those programs, look at those goals, look at that review, because that's where most of their programs will fall under. We have executive leadership team to develop future plans and review the progress. That structure is actually already in place with the manager's direct reports. And we would have ad hoc project review teams that actually manage the priority initiatives within the plan. That's where you have a lot of most of your key work items that come in that might not necessarily be a long-term program that the city's administering, but different projects that come up. Placed in here the vision of Winston-Salem, and the reason I placed that there, I think that's one of the key aspects to this. We will always go back and look at the vision that council has set to make sure what we're doing, we're working in the direction of achieving this vision. And I'll just read this. Municipal government deserving of public confidence that provides excellent and innovative services as an active and cooperative partner in creating a vital community. That's absolutely key. That drives everything that we do. This is just the drill down of the vision action plan. We start with the vision, move down to the focus area, strategic objectives. We have the desired results. The council said, okay, this is what we want to achieve. And the strategies that you've approved, how we're going to go about achieving it. We have the corporate measures that are at the high level, which deal with the focus areas. And we have those program categories and the program measures. How are we going to start drilling down a little further? How are we going to measure these programs and how they're doing? This is actually just an example of at the very high level. Again, the corporate level, this is what council would see and would review. Focus area, safe and secure community, a desired result, increased safety and security of residents. Some strategies that are currently listed are enhancing youth gang prevention outreach, and another strategy is provide a safer community to all citizens through fire intervention programs. And this is where also emergency management would fall, and you see that. So a lot of the questions that you brought up a little earlier would be answered here or through this process. And one of the measures is Part 1 crimes, another is number of attendees of fire education programs. And this is just an example. Accountability. Accountability starts with the mayor and city council setting those objectives, setting those goals, drills down to the city manager, who's responsible for those very high-level goals that council set. Have department directors who are responsible at the program level for administering those programs. You have your supervisors and managers who may either be responsible at the program level, or if you drill down a little further, you have services that are within all those programs. And also the individual employee. And this is a good time to actually mention the new evaluation that HR has put into place. This is where this all ties in. Because everywhere that I've been, this does not work if you do not tie, if people are not individually accountable for these particular objectives or goals that council has set, and you hold them accountable through the evaluation process, and also the funding level of the programs. So that is extremely key. It does not work. Said it before, seen it before. Dollars aren't tied to it. It'll become a book on a shelf and sit somewhere. Where are we now? Focus areas are created. Focus area goals and objectives are created. Staff in the budget office has actually begun to group a lot of the programs into the focus area. So hopefully with the budget that you see from the manager this year, you'll see your focus areas with all the programs that we currently have. We need to go in and do an evaluation to see if some of them need to be shifted around, but you'll see the programs under the focus areas with the dollars, so you can see how they're allocated right now. And we'll also develop a cost spending data by focus area, and that's what I'm speaking of as far as that process. So that's what you'll see this year. These are your focus areas. I think Lee's already gone over all these. You've seen these. And again, here are our next steps. What we want to do, and these are already established again, establish, confirm, council desired results and priorities, identify programs, and group in appropriate focus areas, and that's currently underway. We want to establish key performance indicators and targets. We want to talk to departments to have them say, okay, these are the key targets, this is what we want to achieve, and have council okay and sign off on that. Then we need to establish our program service cost again, and that's hopefully fall of 2015. And then establish the key evaluation results by program service area. How are we going to evaluate these programs? One way that we did it, actually in Mecklenburg County, and a lot of other places use just a piece of it. It's called it's called Program Assessment Rating Tool, where it's several questions where you talk to the departments and you ask questions such as, have you had an outside accounting firm do an audit? Have you had a performance audit? Several things that we ask of our community agencies, we probably should ask of ourselves as well. And that concludes that. Any questions right now that I can answer?
Councilman Burke and then Councilman Adams.
I guess the city manager is thinking within himself, because this morning I sent him a note. And it deals with the same thing you were talking about, accountability, and how do you measure, and I've been here 38, somebody said 38 years in the legislature, Mr. Colonel said a few minutes ago, but since 1977. And I asked how many new things other than some of the elected officials have made good presentations, suggestions, and recommendations that we can look at how departments have created some. And I just think this is just really good. If we get this off of paper, this is the direction we ought to be moving for change and accountability.
Something Councilman Adams has been pushing for.
Jumping up and down, and a few people know that. I've been working on this with the help of the city manager and the HR manager, Ms. Caruth, and others for now about 4 or 5 years now, 5 years. I came in the door, I know, with my corporate Johnson Controls, let's run the city as a business. As Ms. Burke said, they've been on this path a long while, but I guess that was one of those areas that I'm very passionate about, because I've always said, how do we know we're doing good if there's no measurement to measure our performance? And that goes not just from our staff and our personnel, but to the services that we give the citizens of Winston-Salem for their money. We do that as individuals at our own homes or at Councilmember Clark's business. You watch that dollar, because you got to make sure that you're spending it on what you say you're spending it, but then you got to determine whether we really did, or the outcomes or the results were what we planned on having. And I just didn't see that. I saw some variations of attempts over the years to get that. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad that we're moving in this direction, because I don't think it's fair to our employees when it comes to, or our citizens, comes to the services that we provide or the performance evaluation process. You got to be able to measure that. If the city manager or managers give employees a task, and these are your goals, and these are the objectives, and in the third quarter of the game, we don't have any way to determine that we even did any of it. But yet, we're going to give them a merit raise, a bonus, a promotion. The citizens are calling us mad because the 40 Beltway didn't get built, the North Beltway. Mr. Clark's over there talking about his spaces that he's trying to put something in, and nobody's happy. We're just going around in this circle. But I am so glad that we're on this path. I'm looking forward to the updates as we move forward, and I think everybody's going to be happy with this process. As you said, it's going to take more than a year or two, but I'm glad we're on this process to improve our organization's performance. I really am.
Councilman Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor. I definitely echo the comments that have been spoken. Mr. Minor, we appreciate your presentation. I definitely like the idea of data-driven performance measures, and more importantly, I like the idea of tying some of our funding to support some of the departments and programs that actually work. I think that'll be very beneficial to us all as a council, and especially to the Finance Committee with making decisions budget time once we get that information. My question deals with all the information, the data, the statistics, all the information that we have to compile. Can we do that at our current employment levels, or does this require us hiring additional staff in order to execute?
Initially, at least with the framework piece, I think this is something that we can get organized. At some point in time, we may consider, if possible, you work with what you have. If it is a possibility, I mean, you're going to get a better work product. The more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. That's just the fact. But we'll work with what we have until we can get more. And if you like the product and you say, hey, you want to put the money into it because you like the result that you're getting, there you go.
It sounds to me like the year is going to be the benchmark before some additional decisions may be made. I don't want to steal anybody else's thunder, but we'll be keeping an eye on it closely. And again, I think it's a good program, and I appreciate all those who were involved to help to make this happen. I know it hasn't been rolled out yet, but the concept is there, and I think overall it'll help all of our citizens and all of our staff to deliver a better quality of product. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Councilman Clark.
I think one thing that's interesting about this, and for council to, I think, keep in mind as we look at what comes back, particularly from a data-driven place, and then looking at how we then allocate resources, financial resources to those areas, that this will be a non-biased, non-political, data-driven metric. So it may not be what we personally say is the place where resources should be, but it will show us where those resources should be going and how they should go. And it'll be a very interesting task as we look at that to move in that direction, to put the resources where the data is showing us that they need to be placed in. And although we have different pieces that pull on us from doing where we are and where we set those objectives as a community, we know we don't always tackle them all at the same time, and we kind of prioritized, but this will be a very unbiased metric that will help us look at how we allocate those resources.
Councilman Clark.
First of all, I do like the idea, and I think that's been expressed by some other folks. I would not underestimate the degree of difficulty. It is very difficult to really say what is our result. A couple examples came to me. One is mass transit is our result to get more people riding the bus. Well, one thing we're doing in that is changing the bus routes, optimizing them. Another way is just make the buses free. We got a lot more people riding the buses, they were free. But then we got $3 million hole in the budget. That's what we get from the box fare. So, what is the, quote, measurable result of a lot of things? And I think that's going to be difficult to come up with, but I certainly welcome the opportunity to give it the best and see where the chips do fall.
Okay. I think just following up on your comments, Councilmember Clark, the two E's of this project, efficiency and effectiveness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can be very efficient being ineffective.
Yeah.
So you got to, I think, keep the bottom line on the effectiveness piece of it there. Thank you, Mr. Minor. I'm sure this council and I are very interested in seeing this going forward. So now we move to the third piece. Well, before we move to the third piece, how's everybody feeling? You want to push on through?
Yeah, let's get it done.
Get it done? Is everybody, Councilmember Adams, you're hungry?
Yes.
We're thinking about 20 minutes or so?
Yeah,
20 minutes.
20 minutes.
20 minutes.
Yeah.
Take a 2-minute break or
Yeah.
20 minute keep going?
She wasn't alone.
Okay, so
20-minute break.
without objection, 20-minute break, 25-minute break, and the food's in the ante room?
Yep. Thank you.
And
Okay.
Mayor, if they're not back 20 minutes, I'm going to stop.
We're going to say 25. We're going to say 25. We're going to say,
6:30.
I know, we're going to say 15 after 6.
Okay.
It's in the finance conference room just across the hall.
I'm going to start in 20 minutes.
right, it's 6:15. I'll call the meeting back to order. Since everybody is full and properly fed, now's a good time to talk about budget. So, the last supper.
I like that.
If it's the, it's like something about the state legislature, but I won't. So we're going to go ahead and, Mr. Hunter.
Thank you. We'll talk about that tool used in the policy budget. Again, this is just a budget preview right now, and this is where we currently stand. This first slide talks about our tax rate allocation, and this should all be extremely familiar. What you see highlighted is the 2.5 cents of the tax rate that we're dedicating to debt service for the bond referendum that was passed in the fall, which leaves us at a total rate of 56.50 cents.
But the bottom line is there's no tax increase for loss to the general fund.
No tax increase to the general fund. Here we have our projected fiscal year 15-16 budget. As you see, right now we're looking at a $800,000 gap. Expenditures, $178.1. Revenues, $177.3 million. This is in line with our January early forecast. I think we came in January expenditures, we had forecasted at 178.1, almost right on the dot, and the revenues at 177.2. That was early on. Here are a few of our highlights on the revenue side. I want to emphasize the elimination of the privilege license fee. That was a North Carolina legislative change that came into effect July 1st of 2015. That negatively affected us in revenue to the tune of $2.3 million, general fund. We have an increase in sales tax collections. We're assuming a 3% growth from our estimated fiscal year 14-15. And that special note, pay attention to that, the sales tax estimate does not reflect potential impact from proposed state legislation. The other highlight here is the $974,000 increase in our franchise taxes based on receipts to date, and our increase in property tax revenues, and that's real property, $631,000. And we also have the new plan review fee, we'll talk about it a little bit later, of $200,000, and that's going to be used to cover the cost of electronic plan review solution. Questions, please? Here are our expenditure side highlights that we have right now, and as you see, we're expecting to have a roughly $2,162,000 increase on the expenditure side for increase in employee compensation. That's on a merit system. We're basically having our budget 2%, which includes the benefits right now. We're talking about we have a decrease in salary base and longevity due to retirements and other attrition of almost an offset of that same amount, $2,076,000. We also are planning on making additional investment into public safety. We have an addition of an assistant city attorney that's going to deal with nuisance abatement. Also, 3 fire captains for safety and training. I think the fire chief has mentioned this prior. And also, police equipment, supplies, and training. And this is partially to offset the new reduction in federal forfeiture funds, and also fire equipment supplies. $230,000, we're looking at an increased subsidy to the Benton Convention Center. And again, this is short-term, 1 year that we're looking at for that $230,000. Back to the lease payment of electronic plan review. That's the other side of those fees, the new fee that we're going to use to cover that $200,000. We had this current fiscal year an addition of a MWBE project supervisor, and that's supplies and all the additional costs that come along with that position. And if you guys have been watching the news, you see that the fuel expenditures are down. Our projected price of diesel is down, and we took that down by roughly $500,000. And we have the elimination of 2 positions in revenue, and again, that's due to the elimination of the business privilege license by the state. And that affected us to a tune of $118,000, and those FTEs are gone.
Mayor,
Yeah, Councilmember Burke.
I need to ask the city manager to talk a little bit more, either the person. When we talk about increase the subsidy for the convention center, I don't have any problems because I know with tourism and things we need to do to be competitive, we have to bring that convention center up. But I would like for the taxpayers to understand our relationship with the convention center and the private owner.
Thank you, Councilman Burke. We have a management contract with Noble Investments, which manages both the hotels, the Marriott, and the Embassy Suites, as well as our convention center. They manage it for us, and we have a guarantee with them about the subsidy under normal circumstances, and they've kept that subsidy at the same rate for about 8 to 10 years. The reason we were showing this short-term increase in subsidy is for the $17 million in renovations that are planned for the building in order to keep it competitive. We're going to have to take half the building down. The first year it'll be the lower level, and so they will have half a building to lease out. So during that time, they will have significantly less revenues. But once the building is done, we expect to see, based on all the studies, we expect to see the base subsidy go down.
Also, Mayor, members of the council, it was brought to the attention of the TDA that they are providing opportunities for conferences coming to the city. It will not hinder like some may think, and they will be making the public awareness.
Yes.
Councilmember Montgomery and Councilmember Light.
Here's the question, and I'm sure it probably is not included in this number, and I'm sure staff is aware, but on the one at the bottom in terms of elimination of the 2 positions in revenue due to the privilege license fee going away, I know that there is a bill that was introduced specifically in reference to allowing for cities to have a fee for businesses to be able to create and make sure that they're in a system for police and fire. I think it was like a $50 fee associated with that. And just wondering whether or not, if that happens and passes, is there adequate staff to have a system like that, or would we have to maintain one of these, and on that $50, whether or not that would pay for that position, which I don't think it does. But
Councilman Montgomery, yeah, actually the base that revenue would probably pay for those 2 positions. We have looked at that proposal, and we're not sure we have the same need that, say, Greensboro has indicated to have another license. We keep track of our businesses through the tax office, but I have asked staff to bring a report on that just to make sure, since the bill was filed, so we'll take a look at it.
Councilmember Light.
Thank you. Back to the subsidy to the Benton Convention Center. Increased subsidies, shouldn't that be a minus number?
Well, we're on the expenditure side, so we're showing all the. Yep. In other words, it's going to cost the taxpayers more.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Expenditure side there.
All right.
Yeah.
Where are revenue? There we go. Okay, I see it now.
Councilmember Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Manager, my question is directed to you. Members of the council, Mayor, I just wanted to back up really quick. I had a question about the Business Improvement District. I noticed that the manager and the staff is recommending a 9-cent allocation again this year. I just need, this is a request for information, Mr. Garrity, rather than a question. I need the revenues, expenditures, and the fund balances of the downtown partnership with the Business Improvement District Committee. I know they've been meeting, and I know they've been talking about this thing, but just so our record, so we can be good stewards of some of the funding, I'd just like to see all of that information, which will help us to make a decision about how we move forward.
We'll be glad to bring that forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Go ahead.
This is our property tax base. We have our general fund, debt service, and transit funds. You see the projected fiscal year 2016 listed here. And I think that projected number for 2016, that should total about 19.9. And you see that basically there's not too much of a change or increase in our property tax base, slight increase this year. Deeper here. Additional investments in public safety that we're considering this year bringing forward addition, again.
Yes,
assist-
excuse me.
Okay, sorry.
I'm sorry, I did have one question about the property tax-based estimates. I noted that you project a 200,000 drop in the personal property. I assume you're talking about projected amortization of equipment that's
Yes.
business, commercial, manufacturing.
Yes.
Why the downward trend there?
I think that is related to the personal property, the software decrease that we have. It's showing up right there.
Thank you.
Again, thank you, General Assembly.
Once again.
Once again.
If I leave you alone.
Who's in charge down there now?
I'm just sitting here listening.
All righty. Here's our full list again of additional investments in public safety. This is just an echoing again, but slightly more detailed list that we went over prior. And you see equipment, supplies, and training for police at the $90,000. The addition of the 3 fire captains, again, I think our chief has spoken about this on several occasions, of $250,000. And also equipment and supplies for fire at $79,000. And again, that's smoke alarm installation kits, validation tests, and several other items that they have requested.
Councilman Clark.
From time to time, we have adjustments to the budget where we get one-time money from forfeitures and things of that sort that I know we can't use for ongoing, but we can use for special, oftentimes for training, oddballs, not oddball stuff, but one-time type stuff. Can any of that go for stuff like this, like the equipment and supplies, these smoke detectors, grease fire things and all that?
The forfeiture money, there are certain categories it's limited to. You can't use it for fire. It's only for police, law enforcement. And as we're pointing out here, we're going to see a huge reduction in forfeiture funds. Department of Justice changed the rules a few months ago. It takes effect next year, but we will no longer receive forfeiture funds except when we're either having a joint seizure with the federal government, with the federal agency, or in the cases where we have a warrant prior to the seizure. Part of the problem was there were some other agencies, sheriffs mainly, who were pretty aggressive in the use of forfeiture funds to run their budgets, and so the federal government's really clamped down. But we use in the police department, it is our entire training budget is forfeiture funds, so it's a significant loss.
Thank you. Councilman Taylor.
And I just want to state, Mr. Clark, a report will be brought to the Public Safety Committee to discuss everything that has happened, the current state of the forfeiture fund. So feel free to attend.
Thank
you for the
Thank you,
Councilman
sir.
Adams had asked, and I skipped over. I apologize. Councilman Bessie.
I guess my question is, and this can be answered later, Mr. Garrity and staff, the additional investments in public safety, how is this going to help us? What is it, you know what I'm saying? You're saying we need an additional assistant attorney for nuisance abatement. You need to tell me what I have now and how that works versus what are we looking to do or improve with this.
We will.
And the same thing also goes with the other 3 or 4 items. I'm sure everybody knows, like we all are. Safety, there's no price tag for safety of any kind. And I want to know if we do this, again, what is the upside and downside? Like the additional 3 fire captains, is that what that was asked for, or is that what we're just going to settle for right now and move forward until we can get to where we need to be for the plan? I need to know, even for the supplies and equipment, where are we now? Why are we asking for this? What is it going to do for us and our citizens? That's what I need to see. That goes back to that managing for results.
Councilman Bessie.
Thank you. I noticed under the equipment, supplies, and training that it doesn't say anything about the personal protective gear. And I wanted to confirm that those purchases will have been completed in this fiscal year. And I know that we had as a commitment to upgrade the turnout gear for all our firefighters.
Yes, sir. The matter of fact, the first part of the shipment of new structural firefighting gear started arriving last week. So every member of the department who would be reasonably expected to engage in interior structural firefighting will have a second set of gear. And then the gear that they currently have, we have funds budgeted to replace that gear as it ages out. So they'll have a brand new set, and then they'll have a backup, what will become their backup set, and we'll replace that as it ages out, typically on a 10-year cycle, unless it shows signs of needing to be replaced prior to that. You know, some of it gets used more than others, depending on where people are assigned, how often they fight fire.
Right. Does this projected budget include this upcoming fiscal year's increment to continue that replacement as the equipment ages?
Yes, we will continue to replace the gear either on a time or a wear-out basis through just the annual replacement process through regular budget appropriation.
Okay, and the reason I'm following up on that, I don't want to see us fall into the same hole again that we got into previously.
We will not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Montgomery? You're good. Councilmember Taylor?
Chief, well, I know it looks like you're walking back and forth all day. You should have taken Chief Roundtree's suggestion and sat in the front row. So here we are.
Call on the chief.
Councilmember Adams had a very legitimate question, and I don't want to belabor the hour, but I know at the last Public Safety Committee, one of the last ones, you discussed kind of reorganizing the divisional process within the fire department, and that calling for an addition of 3 fire captains. If you can talk about that as briefly as you can, just so everybody will know what we're talking about here.
In essence, right now, we have no training division other than an assistant chief who does his best to manage training activities. And I'll give you some examples. We have a fire academy ongoing right now, and we have 2 captains who have come out of the suppression division, so off of shift onto day duty to manage that fire academy. We have no mechanism to provide a scene safety officer at working events unless we pull somebody out of suppression. So those are sort of 2 examples to in brief say, if we need to do something in training, we have to rob resources from suppression. And this will give us a mechanism to have dedicated personnel resources to the training that is the heart of of any fire services organization. It will give us a dedicated, trained person to provide the safety function that is expected through NFPA standards and through the accreditation model. We will be expected to provide that function on all fires, and it should be somebody who is dedicated to that, who is trained to do that, not robbing an engine company captain or an engineer to provide that function.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Good. All right.
All right. Here are a few potential balancing measures that we have right now. We can eliminate some or all of the proposed investments in public safety up to $512,000. We can look at operating expenditure reductions, basically across the board. Another option is to delay development and implementation of information system projects, $71,000. And there are a few lists of some of those projects that would be affected if we did the delay.
Councilmember Montgomery?
2 things. One, on the operating expenditures reduction, Mr. Manager, would that just be an across-the-board cut that you'd look at, or how would you do that? Are there some more specifics that are not there?
Yeah, there's more specifics not there. My recommendation is never to do across the board. It's not scientific. So we'd be looking where we could reduce with the least impact on the critical objectives of council.
Right, and there were a few other items that I did see previous in terms of where some expenditures will go, but these are the only ones that I see as ones that are here. Are those not listed, as those are not necessarily staff suggested areas of decreasing? Or
that's correct, but everything is on the table. The council could choose to reduce the merit package below the 2% that's recommended. We're also, it's early yet, so Mr. Rao and I were talking this morning with Mr. Minor. There may be some revenue adjustments before we come back in in early May. There also may be some potentials for some other one-time use of fund balance for some capital needs. So there's still some other tweaks, we hope, for the budget.
Okay.
All right.
So here's some proposed uses of the general fund balance. Right now, we normally have our $2 million for operations. That's usually there. May use, may not use. We can fund city fiber network, $386,000. The $230,000 that we had spoken of earlier about the Benton Convention Center, be fund balance allocated. And also using fund balance for neighborhood revitalization strategy area, NRSA, building rehab loan program. Those are some potential uses. Again, there may be others that council sees fit, but some staff.
What is the difference between that last one, the NRSA, and our TURN program? I think I'm using the right acronym for the.
Good question. Brooks going to comment?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Good evening. The TURN program is transforming urban residential areas, and the building rehab program is a program that is geared for commercial upfitting and revitalization.
Well, then what's the difference between NRSA and RUCA?
NRSA is the official designation that HUD provides for the city, which is basically if you were to draw a line and go east of 52, would be east of 52. The RUCA areas are located within the neighborhood, within the NRSA neighborhood revitalization strategy areas. So they are smaller targeted areas within the NRSA.
But if we did get some federal money, we could use it as part of our RUCA program?
Pardon?
This NRSA is federal money. Is that what you're telling me?
No. That's a designation that when you get federal money, you have to have that designation because that's where you indicated your high concentration of low and moderate income and your urgent needs are.
And within those are our little RUCAs that are here.
Correct.
Okay.
Councilmember Clark, this is really mainly building facade improvement program that we used to fund, and we're out of money. We've got several areas. A recent one that's come to our attention is Northwest Boulevard with all the redevelopment there. That program, you can do small $10,000 grants and make a real difference.
Yes,
Understand. Thank you.
I had said to the mayor when they, and Councilwoman Adams, when they did the Chatham building, and I said, I go that area often. And to me, to have those undesirable looking places there, and you're encouraging what you all have been talking about, people with different income and those who may have lower income, since this company said that's what they're going to address as well. So I think that area is just so fitting that you need to be doing something with it.
Yeah. Got an amen from here. Councilman Bray.
Yeah, just really a point of emphasis for anybody who's following along and may miss this. The additional subsidy to the Benton Convention Center is a short-term, that's a one-time thing.
Right.
And that's specifically to offset to the fact that we're having to, take part of it at a time out of service while we're making.
Good point. Good point. Thank you, Councilman Besson.
And may I
Yes,
just say
Councilman
this,
Burke.
if you need to have a better understanding of that, then Mr. Guyver could come to one of your, who's in charge, community development?
Molly.
Come to your meeting and talk a little bit about that.
Yep. Yeah, I think that all of us sitting around the table, that was very clear. Just want to make sure that folks who were watching or were reporting on it didn't get confused.
I was thinking maybe the public itself could benefit from it, since we're asking for an understanding. A lot of them may.
Okay.
Here we have our fiscal year 14-15 year-end general fund balance as compared to fiscal year 13-14. And this is just an estimate right now, $45 million overall, 5.3 of that undesignated, 2.7 million appropriated. Fund balance policy that council had set, it's in fiscal year 14 of at least 12.5%, and also 14.7 million restricted still there. And again, these are estimates, year-end estimates right now. Okay. Ben Rao's going to speak to you briefly about the impacts of recent potential state legislation.
Good evening, Mayor Joines, members of the City Council.
Robin Hood.
Okay. I don't mean to ruin anybody's supper by going over the slide. Did want to kind of recount, the impacts that we have felt from legislation that the state has passed in recent years, and then talk briefly about legislation that is being proposed. So the first half of the table there, three major pieces of legislation. First was the sunset of the hold harmless payment that we had been receiving for a good number of years, dating all the way back when the state had the budget crisis back in the early 2000s. And that officially went away in fiscal year 13-14. The council addressed that issue in fiscal year 12-13 by increasing the tax rate by 0.9 cents to go ahead and position the city to be able to absorb that particular loss of revenue. In that particular year, we used those funds for investments in streets and sidewalks. The next one is the exclusion of proprietary software from the tax base. That happened in this fiscal year, almost $2 million impact there, and the council offset that by increasing the tax rate by a penny. And then finally, the repeal of privilege license fees. That actually has taken place over this fiscal year and will end effective July 1st of 2015. In the current fiscal year, we did see a drop in privilege license fee revenue because the law was changed where we could only charge the fee for businesses that were actually physically located within the city limits. So that was about $300,000 of the $2.9 million, and then the remaining 2.6 is currently split between the general fund, 2.3 million in the general fund, and then $300,000 that we direct into our RUCA program that comes from the privilege license fees that are collected from electronic sweepstakes operations. So in terms of enacted legislation, we're looking at an impact of $6.8 million in lost revenue over the last few years. In terms of potential revenue losses, the big one is the change in the sales tax distribution from point of sale to per capita. That is Senator Brown's proposed legislation, Senate Bill 369. Staff early on, when we had heard about that bill, had estimated about $2.3 million. Of course, the Fiscal Research Division and the League has estimated anywhere between $3.1 to $3.3 million impact to the city. I think that what we've determined is there are some flaws in Brown's legislation. The city hold harmless payment, not the one that was mentioned above, but one that basically replaces the Article 44 sales tax that we had received some years ago. The legislation was silent on that, didn't address that. And in fact, it was the way this legislation was drafted, Article 40 and 42 would be repealed this coming fiscal year, and Article 40 is used to make the calculation of the city hold harmless payment. So I think there was recognition on the part of his staff that was an oversight. And then secondly, the point of the change to a per capita distribution was not only going to take place from the state level to the counties, but then also within the counties to the local governments. Whereas now the counties choose either the ad valorem or the per capita basis. The legislation as it had been filed would have changed it to per capita. And I think, again, that was something that was not the original intent. And I think that he's even stated, publicly that that would probably change in a future amendment to that bill. There is another bill out there, Senator Rucho's bill, Senate Bill 608, that would basically establish a hold harmless level for all counties and municipalities using the fiscal year 13-14 collections, and then any growth above that baseline would then be distributed on a per capita basis to the counties. With both bills, I think that there's concern that it does change the sales tax from local sales tax to a state sales tax. So there's concern that means it runs through the state budget, and while the legislation says that it's a local sales tax, I think there's just concern about, well, how is it actually presented in the state budget? Is it an appropriation? And if it's an appropriation, as we learned back in the early 2000s, it could be potentially taken away. So right now we're just still saying $2.3 million, but we really don't have a firm idea of what it could be, and we're waiting for some analysis from the league on Rucho's bill. And then secondly, there is the potential legislation to de-annex Smith Reynolds Airport. That $294,000 impact, that's based on a tax value of $52 million. The county tax office gave us the values both in terms of real property and business personal property. Its total value is $52 million, and that's based on the proposed tax rate of 56.5 cents. So that's just between those two potential changes, you're looking at almost $2.6 million in lost revenue. And so that would give us a grand total impact of a loss of $9.4 million in terms of a tax rate equivalent. A penny on the tax rate generates just under $2 million a year, and that would be 4.8 cents.
Councilman Burke.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council, the part, all of this I'm interested in. There's been some discussion concerning the Reynolds-Smith Airport de-annexation. For someone to bring up this idea, to do something like this, and then show such disrespect for the people who live in the area. To me, we're humans in that area. We have all rights and privileges of humans, and it's just been so disrespectful even to hear whether it becomes a reality or not. And I have a letter that's going out tomorrow, hopefully, that I reviewed with the city manager and with Mr. Turner. And I have said to every group that's involved, your airport commission, and the mayor can recall years ago when we had a concern how the airport commission met right down here and showed the respect to the citizens in the area. We have had to live with the unsafe feelings, the noise, the disrespect, and so on tomorrow, the letter will go out to everybody who plays a part in this decision, whether it becomes a reality or not. They just need to get a call that we, as the elected official in the area, I do not appreciate this. It is not the idea of everybody, but we want to have something on record. And for the mayor and members of the council, we also have put in this letter that you all are well aware and sensitive about this issue as well. So for the record, I want the people in the area who listening to know that this is not something that we're taking lightly. I think it's just a sign of no respect, even with another government body, to come up, whoever the individual or individuals may be, who's pushing for this. Thank you. Bravo.
Councilman Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to take a moment, and I'm glad Councilmember Burke, since this is in your area, you got the opportunity to speak first. I also feel that, our state representatives and even those county commissioners who are considering this idea, I think is rude, is disrespectful, and it's not tasteful at all. And I won't sit idly by and not say anything about what is happening here. Cities have the responsibility to hold the line. All of us at this table know that cuts can be handed down from the federal government to the state, from the states to the county, from the county to the city. And the city is kind of like our local houses. Me as a father and a husband of one and a father of three, I have a responsibility to hold the line. We don't have anybody else to hand these cuts down to except for our citizens. So I think that anybody who talks about a bill like this or legislation like this is not considering the citizens of the city of Winston-Salem, and it's our responsibility to speak up for them. It's distasteful, it's disrespectful, and it's something that we won't stand for. So, Councilmember Burke, I would say that if you look at all of the items on this particular list, from hold harmless to the proprietary software, the council has taken a official position to say we like this or we don't like this, and for every one of these, our position has been this is harmful to our city. I would encourage the members of the council to take a stand and say this is harmful to our city. Naturally, we don't want to poke at the bear. We don't want to take a finger and poke at the bear's face, but we do need to stand up. If we don't say anything, it'll continue to happen. And if it'll happen in Winston-Salem, it'll happen to Greensboro, and it's happening to Greensboro. It'll happen to every other city if we don't take a comprehensive stand, and I think this should be the time that we do so. Thank you.
Councilman Montgomery.
I echo the sentiments of my colleagues. one thing I will say in terms of looking at the dollars we see here, and I know that Ms. Rao put a tax portion on that 4.8 cents in terms of what that equates to in terms of tax rate. But I would like for us, if possible, to develop some type of infogram that we can at least have in the document and share this with our state representatives, which I think they're aware to an extent, but with our state representatives and state senators who represent us in Raleigh, to show in some type of infogram over this time frame, this is what has been cost to our city. This is how many police officers we could have hired with this. This is how many firefighters we could have hired with this. This is how many X, Y, and Z we could have done with these funds. And this has been the dollar amount that citizens have had to pay out more over this same time period because of the increase in the tax rate over that. And you would think that the premise of that argument would be one that would be in firm foundation with those who are making decisions, because of the fact of it is in all actuality, all of these cuts have, well, majority of these cuts have come down to this level to be a tax increase, when that's not the sentiment in terms of what was the desire. So I think if we can get something, which I think we verbally shared these things in the past with our folk and tried to consistently share that message, but even to a point of to the greater public in that same sense. The other piece, and just going to the Smith Reynolds Airport piece and the de-annexation of that, and just dialogue, which I'm hopeful that doesn't go anywhere personally, but the fact is that it's still a conversation and a dialogue, and it's very much threatening to any other portions of our community that decides to say that, hey, that we think it'll be beneficial if we're no longer part of the city. And so that's like someone coming in and saying they want to de-annex downtown Winston-Salem because we think it'll be an incentive to bring more businesses into downtown. I think that's a fallacious argument in terms of where it stands. But at that same instance, it also needs to understand what comes with that. If you're not a part of the city, you don't get city fire services, you don't get city police protection, you don't get the city services that are a part of being in the city. And so if that's a price that individuals are willing to pay on that, then I think that's something that also needs to be shared with those who are on the other side as well.
Councilmember Adams.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I want to also thank staff, particularly out of our legal office, for being on top of this every day, all day, keeping us informed of how this is going. We heard these conversations when we attended Town Hall Day in Raleigh a couple of weeks ago. We met with some of our representatives there. They understand the sentiments of the city council and the citizens of Winston-Salem when it comes to discussions about assets or pieces of our city, and there has been no real conversation with the city council who represent the citizens of Winston-Salem. I think that's one of the biggest disappointments to me, as Councilmember Burke said. I thought we had a better relationship than that. And I'm not saying all of this is bad, the people, but I thought we had a mutual respect for each other, that we were different, slightly different than other municipalities and counties throughout the state of North Carolina. We actually had a relationship, and we talked with each other about those issues that are concerned of us. The one thing that I requested of our representatives, and the mayor was there, and some of you were there, is that we need a conversation, and we need to have it now versus later, because the train has already left the station. For some of you that know, the bill has been entered because they had some deadlines, and that's process. They had deadlines. Not to say it's going to come to fruition, but based on what we're seeing from across the state, whether it's Wake County, whether it's Guilford, Greensboro, whether it's the donut holes in Burlington that they are wanting to annex and bring into the city, High Point, bring into the city, because they're there, they're county, but they sit right in the middle of the city, and there's several of them in High Point, and they're now talking about annexing those into the city because of the services that receive, as Councilmember Montgomery said. I have requested from the mayor and others, also the financial chair, and the city manager, we need to have a conversation. We need to sit down like family do, and we need to have a conversation with those people who are I'd say delving out our properties and assets without any conversation from this group or the citizens of Winston-Salem. And I'm going to my question that I had to give my comment. My question to Mr. Rao is, I know you've given us this information, but we're seeing the potential of what happens if we keep the revenues of the privileged license tax. I need for the city, as they've said, for us to see the fact that you and I know this money is not coming back. There is no potential anything. Am I right, Attorney? From what it looks like right now, and I've said this now for over the past year, that money's gone. So I think we need to look at the real reality right now of what are we looking at this year, fiscal year coming up, and the next one without this money. Because the governor said he's working on it, he's talked to some people. That conversation was not really had at all at Town Hall Day, and it's not being held in the legislature. So I need you to tell us, how is that going to impact us moving forward once we get past this budget year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay?
And I'm just, I'm coming to Mr. Clark in just a minute, but I certainly agree with Councilmember Adams, and I'm in the process of arranging a meeting with folks from the county. I did have a good conversation with some of the commissioners, and I think there is some room for discussion there. I think we made it very clear that we feel like it's a very, very dangerous precedent to start de-annexing portions of a municipality. So I'm hopeful that we'll have some good solid discussions. Councilman Clark.
Yeah, Ben, you still there? Good. Yes, and thank you, Mayor, for those comments. Part of the change in Raleigh was a broadening of the sales tax base. And I know that movie theater tickets are taxed now, and I think labor to repair cars, some oddball type things. Is there any way of quantifying that? Because that is always the response I always get on the elimination for the tax base has been broadened. I know that would be very difficult to measure. Has that been measured or tried to be measured? What that number is?
We can reach out to the Department of Revenue to see if they've done some analysis on that. We have not. Just how the collection information comes to us, it doesn't provide it to that level of detail.
I think, and I would even mention this to our city attorney, who's kind of our representative with the league and all. I think it's imperative that we quantify that number, because if it's $2 million, that's one thing. If it's $200,000, that's another. Because that's what I always hear back. Well, yeah, we did away with this, but you're getting something in return.
Right.
And I know it was these oddball categories, and I guess movie theaters you could. There are, 4 or 5 in town. You could probably check their sales tax off popcorn versus what it is now. You could take a differential. I just think that's a number we just got to have. Whoever, good luck whoever has to come up with it. It's a number we need. Thank you.
Councilman Vester, you got that number?
I'm afraid not. I did have a couple of comments. One on the de-annexation. I think it's clear that we understand that to be an extremely dangerous precedent and a bad proposal. I was encouraged during our conversation in Raleigh with members of our county delegation that was not particularly well received by our delegation across party lines, which is extremely important. And my understanding, at least at this point, is that it has not been coming from a broad base of support within even the county commission. This was a wild card proposal that should never have been drawn, and hopefully will go back in the deck. On the sales tax distribution, that's a broader problem. I think one that the prospects are unfortunately worse on, and I think that's based at its root in a lack of understanding by a number of legislators from other parts of the state about how important it is for the cities that are driving the increase in our economy to be able to pay for the infrastructure and the public safety, particularly, services necessary to keep that growth coming. Even if your narrow vision is how can a particular district constituents benefit, and that district, it does not include much urban area. You are selling those constituents short in the long run by cutting off the basis of growth that is going to give them potential jobs and an improved quality of life over the long run. And too many of our current legislators from other areas don't understand that relationship. And they need continued remedial education, unfortunately, to pick up on that. So every time a proposal like this comes up that you can argue the merits on the face, okay, is this a better way to allocate the sales tax revenue, or is that a better way to allocate the sales tax revenue? It needs to be simultaneously examined and clarified in the media that the proposal is coming from a false premise, that you can benefit rural areas by undercutting the metropolitan areas that are driving the growth that benefits the state as a whole.
Yeah. Redistribution of wealth just doesn't work. Councilmember Montgomery. No, come on.
I'm going to quote you on that someday.
I will just say that some have probably forgotten the statement of trickle-down economics. I thought that was a premise for a while, that if you put it there, then it'll help support. In reality, when it comes to cities, I do believe that others begin to benefit that way, but that's not the point I was going to ask. But the statement I wanted to make was in reference to what we're dealing with, particularly when we're talking about the redistribution in terms of the tax, the sales tax portions. When we're looking at this, and as this looks, it seemed to have from some place a real reality of potential of happening to some degree. Although we're still seeing the fact that the sales tax base has not been broadened to the point that was originally discussed, even from last year, within the terms of what the General Assembly was making discussion around. And again, I agree that as we're looking at these, we need to be as stern as we can with our state legislators and others to let them know the impact here. But at the end of the day, we don't want to, again, poke the bear in the nose, because as we've seen across the state, that things that are too loud seem to get cut down in terms of more dollars being lost than helping. And so we want to find, in my opinion, the best way to really be effective in what we're doing. And I don't know, is there a way for us to help support some of the areas of potential expansion in the sales tax, some of the areas that they have not yet ventured into in terms of looking at the expansion? Although I may not necessarily agree with some of the premise of where they're looking to expand, if those are the areas that's going to actually make the dollars and cents work for what they're trying to do, by not allowing that, it still has the impact that it's having on local governments and across the state. And from the things I've read, I just have sensed that there's just not been a consensus in Raleigh on which areas to expand and which areas not to expand. Is that the same thing?
That's correct. The League of Municipalities has several strategies that they've discussed, and one of them is exactly that, particularly with Senator Rucho. He's been pushing very hard to broaden the sales tax and tax everybody, lawyers, doctors, everybody. Hospitals, yeah. And so one of the strategies that the League, one option is, help support that strategy as a way to offset, because if it was broadened that far, it certainly would help everybody. So, but that, I don't know how far that will get in Raleigh.
Councilman Burke.
I was just going to say, going back to the airport, we just need to be clear with the message, because they will push you over. It's nice to be kind and civil how you communicate, but the leadership needs to be understood, that we're not a pushover city.
Hear, hear.
We've done too many things in this city for progress.
Yes, ma'am.
And I hope in that letter, when Mr. Turner and I finished with it, they will clearly understand. I want to say to the ones on this council who said what you said this evening, thank you. Because not only am I the representative of the people in that area, you are too, when it comes to how we spend the tax dollars.
turn it back over to Mr. Mott.
Okay. This slide actually highlights some of the issues that you all have been speaking of, potential uses of privilege license fees if restored. A lot of these do focus on equipment, but you could have any mix that you would choose if we had these privilege license fees restored. The first one is the market pay adjustment of $1 million. The city would actually look at 35 additional pursuit vehicles replacements. We're far behind on our replacement schedule for police vehicles as well as fire equipment. We'd have the 3 additional safety and training fire captains that the fire chief spoke of to have them up to his full 6 requested. Transportation, there are dump trucks, tandem dump trucks, and additional rolling stock replacements that are needed. Also, vehicle replacements within vegetation management. Several more front loader scow dump truck replacements and additional training for public safety personnel that's needed, especially with the reduction in forfeiture funds the police is looking at. Our next slide is Carmen Cruz is going to present the market pay study.
In January of 2014, or early 2014, we did a market pay study, and we talked about that when we had budget meetings last year. What we found from that study was that we were pretty significantly behind market cities when it came to average actual pay, and we were behind on entry-level pay. And to begin to address that, what the council approved last year was about $1 million to do 2 things. One was to give a 1.5% pay increase to employees whose actual salaries were behind the market. And about 73% of our employees got that adjustment. In addition to that, you approved, a part of that money was allocated to actually bring employee salaries that were below the livable wage up to $10.10 an hour. About 13% of our employees received that adjustment. We've repeated that study and again this year to see where we stand. And what you have in your packet is the cities we looked at. These are a little bit different than the market that we looked at last year. We took out large cities like Charlotte. We took out smaller jurisdictions like Monroe and Kernersville and some of the others, and also didn't include any private sector data for the triad. And we focused purely on those jurisdictions that are very similar to us in both size and structure. They're the ones that you see above you. When we've done the study, and what we found is we're about the same place as we were last year. Last year, about 80% of our positions were behind the market. Same is true this year. We're maybe a little bit more, 81%, and we're also behind in our entry-level pay. But what we also found, and that's the second slide, is that even though we're behind the market for average actual pay, we've made pretty big strides from year to year internally. What this chart shows you is the positions that we looked at last year, that I showed you last year. And the red numbers are where average actual salaries were last year. If you look at the 2015 column, you see some changes. Our salaries have actually increased. There are a few, like financial analysts, IS analysts, and office assistant, where you haven't seen growth. And most of that is due to retirements where you had more tenured, higher paid employees actually retiring, and then we brought in employees at entry level, so it brought that average actual down. What you also see there is turnover. The turnover that you see this year is pretty dramatically different than it was last year for these particular categories, for these jobs. Overall, our voluntary turnover is only 4.4%. So, in summary, what we found is we haven't, when we compare to the market, you don't see too much difference in where we are relative to the other cities in terms of our average actual salaries. But when you look at where were internally and where we are now, our salaries have improved internally. If you've got questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Mr. Adams?
Yes. Last year, we took a leap of faith that we had to do something. Again, we realized with the world changing as it is, particularly as Councilmember Taylor said, retaining of young people, you got to pay your people. And you got to pay the people that you have even working for you. I know that this year is a juggling act so far as the budget is concerned. I know there's some other variables in place that I won't say we don't want to deal with, but we're trying to make a win-win for everybody involved. I would say that personally, I'm glad we took the steps we took last year, but I think we need to continue to take the steps. Because whatever year we don't continue to move forward, then we're just moving that much far behind. And we'll never close the gap. I'm hoping my council members will help take that stand with me, that we're just going to have to bite the bullet, and we're going to have to do the right thing. Even if we do it, as we said, systematically, that like we did last year. Look at the data, turnover rates that are double digits or higher than most. Look at the jobs that have the most variation of double-digit percentages, light equipment operators, which we cannot seem to retain. They leave. I know we got the job fair coming next week and everything. Office assistants, maintenance workers, and sanitation labor. If we would go again and say, okay, we can't give everybody the bridge, but the ones that are the most despairing, we need to continue to bridge that. My peers on the council, I think we just need to figure out a way to make it happen, but I think we cannot not pay the people who make the less money, who do the most laborious employment. I just feel that way.
Councilmember Bestie?
On the chart here, there appears to be an error. Fire captain, the 2015 Winston-Salem salary is actually less than what's written for the market, but it shows it as Winston-Salem having a plus variance. Can you?
I did make a mistake.
Okay. Should that be a negative?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Montgomery?
Yes. In looking at, I share sentiments in terms of the fact that we have to compensate our staff for the work that they do, and particularly when we look at some of the level of jobs that's being done. That's why I was so much in support in last year of making sure that we included in our budget a base that was a living wage in terms of $10.10 from budget for last year. But I do believe that there are other areas that we should continue to look in. One of the things that I've been consistent about as well has been the fact of it is a difficult task to consistently do both merit increases as well as market increases when there's no increase in the tax base, which means that you have to pull the dollars from other areas. And so that is a conundrum of sorts that we have to figure out, and it's something that I think is tough in looking at. And so for me, it's always been one, when we see increase in the tax base, it makes it easier to be able to do that type of stuff. And when we don't do it, doesn't mean that it's not something that we see as necessary and that there's not value in doing those, but it makes it financially difficult to do. But one thing I think in justifying some of these areas, like we look at the office assistants positions where you see 33% turnover, and the light equipment operators where you see a 10% turnover rate, it will be interesting also to have another column that associates the cost associated with turnover, because there is a cost associated with high turnover in positions, the training that has to be done, and those other efforts that are done when you hire new people in and then have to train them over for a position. What type of cost can we allocate to that? Because there is something to be said about that dollar amount in some of those areas where we see a much larger turnover rate. And I think that's something interesting for us to look at.
Okay. Councilmember Clark, and then Councilmember Light.
I find this chart very perplexing in that there appears to be no correlation between the percent that we're under and the turnover. And I'd appreciate if staff would graph those last two lines. You would think the greater the variance, the more the turnover. Now, that does apply to office assistants, but you look down at the bottom, IS analysts are 21 and 0. So that tells me maybe we're not measuring the market correctly. Because, in fact, if the IS people are really 21% overpaid, you would think they would all leave. But none of them did. Office assistants make sense because there are lots of businesses have office assistants. Now, how you measure police and fire, because unless you wanted to physically move, you really got, I guess Kernersville has police and fire, and Guilford County, maybe some outlying counties. So it might be worthwhile to look at what is the market. For example, I'm just looking at the cities, what Fayetteville pays anybody really doesn't impact us, whether it's high or low. But certainly what Forsyth County, Greensboro, High Point. And I don't know, again, this kind of gets back to that issue on the sales tax. I don't know if you can get private sector data. But I just find this graph just very perplexing because there seems to be absolutely no correlation. When you do the graph, we can check it. But there just seems to be data points everywhere. The second best category we had was firefighters at -2%, and it had the third highest turnover. So, and I realize there may be other issues there, but again, I just find it perplexing, and maybe we need to torture the data some more.
Mr. Light.
Thank you. What I would like to see, if it's possible, the next column. There may be all sorts of reasons for the turnover, so I'm not as impressed with that. But like with the light equipment operators, are 30% underpaid compared to the market. How many light equipment operators does the city have? How much is this in whole dollars? And how many maintenance workers and office assistants and IS analysts? So if we can have a dollar amount for that, those that are in the double digits, maybe we can isolate those as being deserving of an extra increase if we can afford it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Carmen.
Okay. All right. This next slide is a graph that's probably fairly familiar. It's projected debt service fund balance. You see fiscal year 16, 60 million, fiscal year 18, 50 million, and fiscal year 20, 29.2 million. And I think fiscal year 16, I think that 60 million is projected to be issued January the 1st. See, in 2014, we dipped down to 2 million in fund balance, but that should be the lowest that we should go. Moving on, we have the Winston-Salem Transit Authority Fund Reserve. What you see here in this particular grant, if you look at fiscal year 14, we have property tax revenues that have increased to over $640,000 as compared to fiscal year 13, and that was a one-time tag and tax system increase. It's near that high point. For expenses in fiscal year 16, we're looking at STP DA grant of $3.4 million plus a local match of $600,000. And that includes we're getting 6 large hybrids, as well as 1 Trans-Aid hybrid, and receiving a state match of $300,000. And that is delivery estimated fall of 2015. That's what we would get there.
Mayor, this is kind of a worst-case scenario.
Yes.
What we're assuming here is that we don't receive any state matches on our buses. It's a competitive process, so you never know for sure. We've been successful the last several years, but this is the worst-case scenario. It hopefully will be better than this, but we wanted to show what would happen if revenues stayed the same as far as fare revenues, and our state revenues went down.
Yeah, I just wanted to explore that a little further. The dotted line here shows a continuing fairly steep decline in the fund reserve that I need to ask for a more full explanation of why that runs counter to the trend that we've seen the last 3 years. We implemented what we hoped would be a long-term fix.
Right.
I
think we can bring you the detailed pro forma. I think the primary, as you can see, when we implemented that increase, council put an additional, I think, $0.015 into the tax fund. But we've continued to receive state and federal funding, particularly for the capital. The capital matches are so high, and what this assumes is we wouldn't get those in the future, which again would be worst case. But we can bring you that detailed pro forma so you can look at it.
This is very different from the longer term chart that we saw just a couple years ago.
And again, this is worst case scenario, as we pointed out. So you'll see a different chart.
Please, thank you.
Mr. McClure.
Yeah. The previous graph was perplexing. This one is, and Dan and I have been on the council at the same time. It seems to me every year we see this graph going down, and every year something happens, and it kept pushing out. Now, eventually it did hit zero 2 years ago, but for many, many years, we always saw this severely downward sloping, but we were always able to put it off. And I think, as Mr. Garrity said, a lot of it had to do with the capital money for new buses, basically. But I think we need, while this may be the worst case, I think we need more of a realistic or maybe best case. Because I'm like Mr. Bessie, I thought we put in that 1.5 cents to stabilize it. And it's probably inaccurate to assume we will not get any federal or state money. But it may be also inaccurate to assume we get it all the time.
Right. And we need to take into account that our rate of bus replacement will change if we start missing out on every matching dollar we request. We'll have to go to a slower replacement of buses. So this doesn't reflect, I think, a realistic projection.
All right, Councilman Burke.
I would like to add this, even though we're speaking about this, we have very little authority with the transit. City manager, will you address that? Because we wish we had more authority, I do, in providing a service for the citizens.
Yes, Councilman Burke. There are two issues with the authority. One, this council created many years ago a transit authority of citizens that are appointed by this board, and they set a lot of the policies for the transit authority. But the bigger issue is because the transit employees are unionized and under state law, we're not allowed to directly bargain and enter in a collective bargaining agreement. City governments are not allowed by state law to enter into a collective bargaining agreement. We contract out the management of WISTA to a private management company. It's a large international company that manages bus systems all over the world, and they manage the operations, and they enter into the collective bargaining agreement. But ultimately, this council still, through the budget primarily, has control over the allocation of resources. It's the day-to-day policies that we don't control.
Sometimes, Mayor, members of the council, it's the day-to-day policies that create problems that we have no control, and our constituents sometimes get confused and think that we're not supporting them or standing up for them. But I feel that this council, we do the best we can with the limited ability that or the rights that we have to work with.
Councilman Adams.
Yes. How will this graph reflect the route changes with Winston-Salem Transit Authority? Will we see any increase in savings, not revenue, but will we see a decrease in expenditures or anything like that? Because I'm not saying it's going to be a lot of money, but with this upcoming change that we're making, which is a significant change that hasn't been made in ever, I don't think, there's got to be some highs and lows, some pluses and minuses somewhere.
If I may, what we told Winston in the study was to come back with their recommendations recommended changes for efficiency, but assume the same budget level. So that would be an expenditure neutral set of recommendations that we could either, direct additional savings, or we can say, all right, the service level is not up to par, and we'll make changes the other way. But the recommendation that they'll be coming in with for our review was directed to be not a revenue neutral. Well, yeah, revenue neutral, but also an expenditure neutral.
We didn't include it here, but we are hopeful that we'll get some increased ridership from the new optimization.
Which could actually increase the revenue.
Yeah.
All right, calendar.
Here's our calendar. So here we are today, budget update. On Thursday, May the 20th, we're looking at distributing budget proposal to the mayor and city council.
21st?
I'm sorry?
21st.
Said the 20th.
I'm sorry. I said the 21st. I apologize.
No, you said 20th. Now
I'm sorry. I apologize. 21st. I truly apologize.
I'll be here both days.
All right. And just want to highlight some of the Finance Committee workshops, May the 28th, and also June the 2nd, Council Committee Room, and also the public hearing on June the 4th, to be held at 7 p.m. Then we move on down, June the 8th date, Finance Committee Meeting Room Workshop. Then Monday, June the 8th, again at 6 p.m., Public Safety Committee. June the 9th, Council Committee Room, Finance Committee Workshop, additional meeting if that meeting is needed. June the 15th, City Council Chambers, public hearing on budget adoption, 7 p.m., June 15th.
Do we have any idea when the General Assembly expects to conclude that session?
Not right now.
Keep the budget open.
Just
Have to try to end around or before July 4th, but right now, do not have an anticipated date.
just in consideration of some items that are being discussed and
Right.
what budget.
Council will have a couple of options. You could pass an interim budget, or I would probably recommend you go ahead and adopt the budget. The law now allows you to go back. If there's a significant revenue change, you're allowed to go back and make adjustments on either side. If we were going to adjust the tax rate because of additional torture from the state, we'd probably have to do that by the beginning of August, because that's when in order for the tax office to send out bills.
Councilman Burke.
Mayor, members of the council, I'd like to address this to the city manager. In the past, we've had ways that we have been able to communicate with folks who may not be able to come to any of these meetings. What we'll be doing this year.
We will be doing all of the items that we did last year. We'll be creating a video. Mr. McNeil will do that. We will run that explains the budget in brief. We'll do a very high level pamphlet on the budget in brief. We will also be doing ads in the newspaper. So we'll have several ways to communicate, as well as also we do information on our website and allow citizens to either send in their comments or call in their comments about the budget.
That's the good part at the end, where they can call in.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilman Light.
Thank you. We have reached the time, the General Assembly has reached the time, the first part of this month, or next month, I guess it is, that they can no longer file bills.
The Senate's already reached their deadline, and the House deadline is April 1st.
Okay.
April Fool's Day. Yeah.
So, in fact, we'll have some sort of feeling about their effect on us, not whether bills pass or fail, but at least worst case scenario.
Yeah. A lot changes at the end, as we all know.
There are probably a lot of placeholder bills filed that make you fill in the blanks on.
I see.
There was one bill one time, they completely changed what it was.
The motorcycle bill.
Yeah, it happens on a regular basis, and amendments to the budget bills can be done at the whim of the leadership. Just another issue related to transportation funding I needed to flag for the council, because I'm going to need feedback probably at some point. The transportation money coming from the federal and state levels has been shrinking, particularly to transit. and so a limited pool of funds is seeing increased competition. We have services provided in transit on a regional basis that we benefit from. The Piedmont Authority for Regional Transportation oversees and provides. I represent the council on the park board, and of course we got our own internal WISTA system for transit in the city. There are more requests coming in to the regional Metropolitan Planning Organization, the Transportation Advisory Committee that several of us serve on, representing the council. There are more requests coming in for a limited pool of funds than there is money in the limited pool. The regional planning body, the TAC, is going to have to make some calls on where to allocate funding. It's not completely a zero-sum game, but there are going to be some zero-sum decisions involved there. A potential competition will be from some of the capital funds that WISTA has planned for bus replacement, and some of the capital funds that PART had budgeted from other federal money that ain't coming now. So, while it's possible that staff will work out a functional division there that will work, it's also possible there could be ultimately a disagreement that staff level doesn't resolve. If that happens, then I'll be coming back to y'all for feedback on how should we vote to allocation. So just want to flag that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Minor. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Anything else? Had to get have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Motion second to adjourn. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. We are adjourned.